Hey everyone, Happy Friday.
What's up?
So it's been a while since we did this. Last week there was work being done in my house, so I couldn't do it.
And then the week before that, Bob, wasn't it Bob's thing?
That was Bob's thing? Yeah, was that 2 weeks ago? Bob's thing. We were out of town. We're all out of town.
Yeah. Lots of crazy shit happening in the news. I don't know what you guys want to talk about, but
probably not that.
Yeah, none of anything.
Any science news you want to talk about?
How about the guy that came back from the International Space Station and he broke the record for how long he was up there?
Yeah, it's over a year.
Yeah, so he broke the record, and 2 people came down, and they were up there so long that they can't walk.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
And even with the daily exercise that they make them do,
they could have like permanent damage. It's like not fun.
Yeah. I bet you it's months of recovery to get back.
Even with all the exercise they do, huh?
Which is nuts. They do nuts. Crazy.
And even still, they can't walk. What's it going to be like for people who go to Mars for 3 years?
Like I've thought about that. I mean,
they're going to be cancer ridden and won't be able to walk.
Yeah, they'll just be in a wheelbarrow, big blob of cancer.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. I mean, I would like to think, first of all, that we would have like something significant on Mars for them before they go. Right? We need to be able to set up their camp and everything, and having a legit enclosure for them.
Yeah.
Oxygen being produced.
Yeah, I mean, they need radiation protection while on the surface of Mars. I mean, they should have shelters and...
underground shelters,
underground, right? Ideally, but that's obviously harder to build unless they're in a lava tube or something. But of course, I got the trip. Nothing you can do about that, you know.
Yeah, just go fast.
Nothing you can do about the gravity on Mars, you know. They can exercise. I guess they have some gravity, but it's still pretty low.
And the magnetosphere on Mars is super spotty and weak.
Right, so that's why the surface is not protected from cosmic rays.
I mean, why couldn't they...
the atmosphere is so thin.
How much regolith would you need to get protection from radiation?
Probably only a few feet, right?
feet. I'd say a few feet. Yeah, man. It's a no-brainer. Lava holes are no-brainers in my mind. So many reasons.
Yeah, I wonder if they
More
could.
more so on the moon even than potentially even Mars. But
You know, the problem is we know so little about the Martian soil and like what it's like when you go down 10 feet. You know, we don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it like digging sand, or does it get to a point where it's more you know, it's like soil? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the consistency-wise, that shouldn't be an issue.
Well, you'd want to put a layer on top of an enclosure that can handle it, but then you don't want it to just get blown away.
Yeah.
They might have to put a covering over that just so, you know, sandstorms won't blow it away. You know. But yeah, I was doing some research for a couple of news items that I had done recently, and I was doing a lot of reading about, like, you know, the current tests that we have of people living in fake enclosures, like to simulate like the, you know, just doing it, you know, just living there and going through the motions. But I really don't think that we have any clarity at all on what their camp structure would be like yet. I can't find anything definitive.
I know they have a pretty good idea. I mean, we covered that mock-up. Because they're in there now, right? They're in the Mars simulator now. They just started. They're going to be in there for how long? Is it a year? I think it's a year, right?
Yeah, it's a year.
And you know, it's a reasonable mock-up of what it's going to look like. I doubt it's going to be substantially different from that. You know, and it seemed pretty minimal. If anything, I would think it would be better. But it could, even if it's just what it is, it's a pretty tight space. But it's they have a workspace, they have a living space. You know, they have a little simulated outdoor space.
I get that. I'm talking about, is it going to be 3D printed? Is it going to be pre-built on Earth? Is it going to be pre-built on Earth and then expand, open up? Of course, you know, probably could be a combination of all those things. You know, but would they use Martian regolith for inside the 3D printer as a building material? You know, like all of these things are still possible.
Yep.
It's too bad that these lazy roboticists are not moving fast enough.
yeah, man. Come on, Christian.
Yeah, Christian's got to step it up, man. No, but it'd be great though. Imagine if we did have robots that could just go and build them an enclosure.
I do all the time, Jay.
Yeah, we're going to have to do that. They're going to have to land on Mars with enclosures already up and running, right? If they're going to stay for any length of time. What's the minimum time they have to stay before they're waiting for the next window, right? Because they can't turn around and come back just because they want to. They have to wait until the next window.
Yeah, I think it's like over a year. It's like a year and a half or something, isn't it?
Something like that.
I think it was that long.
Well, the other thing too is we
have to, with enough fuel, or you're not beholden to what is it, the Hahnemann orbits.
We'd have to supply that. We'd have to supply wherever their base was, like way ahead of time. Like there'd have to be like a ton of stuff, food and everything that they'd need.
Fuel, they could make fuel fairly easy, you know, relatively easily.
Yep.
In there, I don't think it's Hoffman. Yeah, Hahnemann.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking about James Randi yesterday.
Were you?
Yeah, I was thinking about, well, we've been working on our conference that's coming up, Noticon. And then I'm thinking about TAM and, you know, just trying to remember details about what it was like going to TAM. And you know, how stream of consciousness goes. And I'm like thinking about Randy and all the stuff we did with Randy. And then I watched a couple of videos that Randy had made where he was on different TV shows and, you know, like documentaries about, like, you know, it's pretty awesome. That guy's career was super entertaining, intellectually valuable, and it was like a humanitarian effort, you know. And when you look at the old school video of Uri Geller on the Tonight Show, the night that Randy told what's his face,
Johnny Carson shut him down.
So Johnny Carson saw that they had booked Uri Geller, so he asked Randy, like, what can I do to make sure that this guy can't do any trickery, you know? So Randy said, don't let him use his own gear, right? He's going to bring, I can't read that, Bob.
Hohmann transfer orbit.
Okay.
Keep
He
talking.
said, don't let him bring his own gear, like none of his own spoons or any pieces of metal, all that stuff. You supply him everything and don't let him come in contact with any of this stuff before the show, right? When you watch it, it's actually embarrassing to watch because it 100% of course proves that Uri is like complete bullshit, And Uri was acting like he was like acting as if like he was intimidated by the stuff on the table, and he's like saying he's under a lot of pressure and that like he doesn't have his power, isn't working right then. He was being super dodgy. Of course, he couldn't accomplish a thing. All just because Randy said don't let him come in contact with his props.
Yeah. So we just did for TikTok. I reviewed a different video where Randy, it's the one where the guy moves the pages of the telephone book with his mind.
Yeah.
Right. And Randy shut him down by just putting little like Excelsior around it, little foam pieces.
Yep.
So that he couldn't blow the page. Remember when Randy demonstrated that to us? You went like this, right? And then cheap dude, but the thing is, like, you're far enough away that you blow, and then you turn away, so you're looking away when the air hits it, right?
Yeah.
It's very convincing illusion.
Nice move.
But anyway, Randy told us this story multiple times because he loved the story about how he foiled this guy with just the little foam pieces. So you watch the video, though, the guy's standing there for like a minute, like trying to move these pages. Of course, he's not doing anything, right? And I figured that he spent that minute thinking up his bullshit excuse for why his powers weren't operating that night. And he had the lamest excuses. It's like there's electricity between the light and the foam is interfering with the powers. Like, it was ridiculous. But it was fun to watch.
Yeah, that guy, it's fun to watch them squirm, because
the squirming and the rationalization.
But to think, Randy's like, all right, how's he doing it? All right, he's using air. He has to be.
Yeah.
Randy had to sit there as a magician and figure out, what's this guy's what's the trick. And when you watch the guy do it, he does approach the phone book because it's just an open phone book, right? With the pages like facing him, so like the pages would move forward away from him,
Mm-hmm.
and he approaches it kind of dramatically, but I think it was out of necessity because he needed to get the airflow moving. You know what I mean? And it looks really cool.
I don't know if that was necessary.
It
a lot of
looks
it's
really
just
cool.
distraction. It's just anything to make you think he's doing what he's not doing. What he's doing. You know what I mean? Whatever he's doing, he has to divert you away from that as much as possible.
Yeah, that's a great thing that he did. So another cool thing that I really love is Uri Geller went on the Barbara Walters show, and he tricked her. He like bent her key, right, her home key. So he bends it, with sleight of hand, and then
he told us how he did it. He held it in his hand. He stood up from the chair, and when he stood up, that's when he bent it. He was pushing the key against the arm of the chair.
Yeah,
that was it. It was done. And then everything after that was bullshit. Then it was already bent, and he just was, did this showmanship thing for a minute, and then boom, put it in her hand.
So she bought it, and she
freaked out.
She was 100% like, yep, this guy's got powers, right? So then Randy comes on her show, and the way that Randy handled her and the whole thing was so smooth. You know what I mean? He wasn't like offensive. He just, he's just basically saying, this is what he did. This is how he did it. So they bring out another key, and he's like, okay, he's got the key in his hand. And Barbara Walters goes, all right, I am not going to take my eyes off of that key. Right? So Randy was capable of making her actually lose sight of the key without thinking she lost sight of the key. Right? So he had a really good sleight of hand to do that.
That's what I was talking about. That's how Randy did it.
Yeah.
He did it when he stood up by pushing it against, leveraging it against.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, Uri Geller did it a similar way. He bent the key right there when he was sitting there. He had to bend it somehow while he was there.
Right.
Because what he does is he'll like take the item and then he'll talk about something else. and
Mhm.
divert your attention with another story or whatever, and then he'll come back to it, and he's done it at that point. He's bent it.
Yeah.
So Randy does it, and Barbara Walters, like, you could see the expression on her face where she's like, "Oh my God, the guy's a fake." You know what I mean? Like, he completely convinced her that this guy just did sleight of hand on her. And I just thought Randy's performance on that was so awesome. And he's such a genuine person, you know, like
Mhm.
it's almost as if he's not performing, you know, he's like
Yeah.
super genuine. I really miss him. I miss all the times that we had with him throughout the year. You know, remember when he was on the show for a little while, like he had his own segment.
That was awesome.
Yeah, he was definitely awesome. But speaking of conferences, you know, everybody must know at this point, Noticon's coming up November 3rd and 4th. I'm super proud of the work that we've done. You know, it's been a lot. It's a lot of work to put a conference together. And this was like this type of conference has a lot less complexity than, say, like an in-person Nexus, because there isn't like 15 to 20 guests that we have to coordinate, you know, first have them make the commitment, then coordinate flying them in, transportation, hotel, and all that stuff. It gets super, super complicated when you have that. But just, you know, getting all of us to do what we need to do and make all the arrangements and insurance and all this stuff, it's an incredible amount of work. But it's been really awesome. Like Ian and I have been working really hard the last couple of weeks, and we have the whole thing like under our thumb. So if you go to notaconcon.com, right, Ian?
Yes, that's the joke, sort of.
Yeah,
So
that was it.
is also the only one that's available.
Yeah, I mean,
Noticoncon.com.
Yeah, notaconcon.com.
This is how it works. This is how a lot of decisions that Ian and I make, especially with the web. Like, you're like, okay, this is the address that we want. Of course, Noticon has been someone is basically squatting on it, and they want $5,000 for it. So I think it was Ian's idea. He's like, let's just add another con on there and get it. Who gives a shit? You're like, all right, done. I'm not, you know, I'll pay like $3 a year now for that, whatever it is, right? Instead of $5,000.
That's funny to say.
Yeah, notaconcon.com. And then we were joking because we know George was going to make fun of it, which he did.
Which he did. We knew it. We know that guy.
So we have, I think there's literally 2 seats left in the VIP, which is happening on Thursday night. If you go to the VIP, it's basically a 2-hour hangout at a local restaurant bar. You will get to pick VIP seating for the conference, and you get first dibs on all of the SGU legacy merch that we have. Steve and I have quite a bit of T-shirts that, you know, we had a certain T-shirt made, and we bring it to a conference and we sell them, and then there's always an overflow. We always have extra stuff. So we're selling all of those T-shirts for $5 each, which is an unbelievably good price. Yeah,
I'm gonna buy some.
Yeah, I mean, I used to, every once in a while, I'd grab a couple, and those would be like the shirts that I sleep in, you know, like a nighttime shirt. But anyway, so we would say that they would get first dibs on buying all that swag. There's going to be other merch there, like this hat. I don't know if I told you guys on the live stream, I have found a company that can make this hat. So this is a particular, they call it a blank, right? This hat right here is my favorite trucker hat. I will not, you know, if I'm using a trucker hat, it's going to be this specific hat. But I had to find a company that makes patches and can then also sew them onto the hats. And I was trying to get like a company to make the patches, and then I'd ship them to a hat company. But the hat companies did not want to take anybody else's stuff. They want you to use their stuff. And that was the big holdup. So I finally found a company, and the hats will be at the conference. You could buy them there if you're interested. And we'll have a bunch of other stuff. I know George is going to bring some swag and some of his stuff. So there'll be a nice array of merch there as well.
And books, which we will be signing.
We will be signing, correct.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you haven't considered the conference, then please do consider it, because it's going to be a really good time. Like right now,
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be really fun.
We have there's a dinner also on Friday night that you could opt in if you want. You don't have to. There's tons of restaurants in White Plains, so you know, grabbing a good meal is not going to be a hard thing to do. But we did organize a dinner, And then all of us will be there. We'll be hanging around, moving from table to table and having some fun. Kind of like we did at TAM, right? But there'll be more of us because George, Brian, and Andrea will also be there. And then Friday night, we have Boomer versus Zoomer, which is our game show. We're going to be picking 4 contestants out of the audience. And we have some cool things planned for that we've never done before with Boomer versus Zoomer. And then Saturday night, George and Brian will be doing the Insane 80s sing-along. There will be a special guest that night, which I highly recommend you do not miss because it's going to be a shitload of fun. So that's going to be a great night. So we'll do that, and then we'll all go to the hotel bar afterwards and hang out. Do you guys have any questions, Bob and Steve? Would you like me to answer anything that you think that you don't know about this conference? Because I know everything about the conference. You're good?
Yeah. What are you gonna
What are you wearing?
What are you gonna teach in our little teaching session?
Ooh.
So one of the segments that we're doing is called SGU University. So it's going to be all of us from the SGU, Brian, George, and Andrea. Each one of us will take 10 minutes and teach the audience something. So I'll say what mine is, but let's not spill the beans on everything because it's, that's part of the fun. Is when you don't know like what's Steve going to do. But it is interesting. We picked
You
provocative
can tell
things.
them what we're going to do. It's only
All right.
these people.
If you want to, that's fine. It's up to you, Steve. So anyway, I am considering. I have a few things that I'm considering. The one I'm leaning towards is, and I know it's a little bit like maybe only I'll be entertained by it, but I wanted to talk about bread yeast, which is also brewer's yeast, and talk about why it does what it does and what's so special about it.
Bread yeast.
Yeah, I mean it does something very significant to bread, and most bread that you eat is made with yeast. Without yeast, bread wouldn't be the way that it
Yeah, but
is.
it's supposed to teach the audience to do something, not just give them information. What are you going to be teaching them to do?
I could absolutely teach them how to
Harvest their own yeast.
how to make
How
their own.
how to harvest yeast, how to maintain yeast, how to keep it alive.
Yeah, if they wanted to make yeast, then they can have.
Can
a
you
starter at
harvest
home.
yeast from a human? Is that weird?
No,
Don't recommend it.
I don't
one
recommend- okay.
cool thing about yeast,
It's everywhere.
it's
It
freaking
is.
everywhere, and also spores from mold are everywhere. They're in our environment constantly, and the thing that activates them is food. Right? They need food. So mold spores can be activated just with water, but yeast needs sugar and water. Right? So they get the sugar from the flour. So you would mix water and flour together. And there's yeast in the flour too, so it's there. You could make your own starter, just like that. But anyway, yeah. So I'm thinking about that. I have a couple of other things that I'm tossing around. Go ahead, Steve. You want to say what you're going to do?
I'm going to teach people how to do a neurological exam, which I think will be fun. But the thing is, I won't be able to get through an entire exam in 10 minutes, so I have to pick. I'm thinking of letting the audience pick which part of the exam that I'm going to do, and then ignoring it and doing the part that I want to do.
Well,
The brain part.
who are you going to be doing it on, Steve? An audience member or one of us? What are you going to do?
Probably on one of you guys.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't want, because there's probably going to be a lot of touching involved. I'll probably just do one of you guys. It'll
Well,
be
I'm
fun.
sure that Fred
You ain't touching me.
Cosette won't matter.
Oh my
won't
God,
be bothered
Silac.
with you touching him. Yeah, Silac will let you do it.
He
Whatever.
loves it.
I mean, he'll take his shirt off and all that.
Flap him around. It's fine.
Now, I think so. Some parts of the exam are more visually interesting than other parts of the exam, so I'm going to do the parts that are the most visually interesting.
All right, that's cool.
Well, yeah, it'll be fun. There's a lot of things like you would never think about. Like it's good. It's fun to know. Like, patients always misunderstand what I'm doing.
Do
during
your
these.
patients ever, ask you what are you doing, or is it usually just all silent?
Sometimes they do. Here, I'll tell you. This is like the kind of thing I'll talk about. But the biggest misunderstanding is that patients don't realize, when I'm giving you a task to do, I don't care how well you do it in terms of, I just really just care if you're neurologically intact or not. So I think the best way to think about this, when I'm doing the mental status exam, I don't care how smart you are. It's not about how smart you are. It's about, are all the different pieces of your brain working? That's right. You understand the difference?
Yeah.
So, but patients always think it's like, oh, I'm testing to see how smart they are, how coordinated they are. It's like, no, I just want to know that you're intact. It's two different things. It could be a subtle difference, but you know what I'm saying? It's like when you're doing the mental status exam, it's always in the context of their baseline.
Mm-hmm.
It's like sometimes like you need to know what a patient's education level is.
Why?
And sometimes I'll ask them. I usually get take that in the history before the exam, but I'll even ask them, like, you know, while I'm doing the test, like, is this something that you would normally be able to do? Right? If I think it's like, oh, this is a little outside the range of what I would expect, I need a little bit more information. You know what I'm saying?
So, I mean, what usually happens is like you can give somebody a physical test,
Yeah.
and if their body doesn't behave a certain way, you can tell what's wrong with them in their brain.
Yeah. Right. So essentially, you're trying to isolate circuits in the nervous system, not just the brain, but in the entire nervous system as much as possible, which you can't really do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll go into more detail about this on the stage. But the idea is like this test, and the tests are not arbitrary. They're actually, these are like, they have been researched, they're standardized or validated. Like we do things in a very particular way.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just trying to isolate a circuit, you know, some function, some specific function. It's trying to isolate it in such a way that I know that if you can't do it, it's not just a matter of can you do it or can you not do it. It's also like, how do you fail? Right? What does it look like when you fail, and how difficult is it for you? Like if you have a language problem, you won't be able to answer my math question, but not because you can't do math. It's because you have a language problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I need to be able to tell the difference between those two things. Anyway, there's a lot to talk about. I mean, obviously I lecture for hours about this. I have to condense it down into 10 minutes. That's why I'm just going to focus on
1 10-minute.
one section. I'll probably do the motor and cerebellar part of the exam, because that's the most physically involved on the stage, you know.
Yep. Cool. What about you, Bob?
I'm going to teach people how to make a cemetery.
How to make a cemetery.
What?
Tombstone, zombie, cemetery fence. Easy ways to make awesome shit.
Okay.
Shocker, I know. Shocker. That came out of left field.
What the hell is Mugu Gai Pan? Can anybody
Yeah.
explain that to me?
I know that
Eat it.
Guy is chicken, and one of the other words is mushrooms. It's chicken and mushrooms.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not getting that.
That's only
But
half.
you know, and other vegetables. But I know like Guy, I'm pretty sure is chicken, and one of the other words is mushrooms.
My kids,
And I know that because one time I ordered Mugu Gai Pan with no mushrooms.
and that's half of it.
Yeah, and the guy laughed. He's like, it means chicken and mushrooms.
Hold the chicken and the mushroom.
So I'm very proud.
Well, the potatoes
pan.
au gratin, but no cheese.
Yeah.
So my real quick, I have to gloat as a father. My son Dylan in school today, they had like an assembly, you know, where the whole school goes into the gym and everybody's sitting there and they do like this, they call it like a town hall. And Dylan took testing last spring for English and math, right? And he scored so well that they had him stand up in front of the whole school and say, you know, Dylan Novella got essentially the highest score in the school.
No
Wow.
way.
Yeah.
Wow. That's nice, Jay.
It's amazing. I mean, it feels so good because, you know, it's funny. Like, I don't know, like I don't see a lot of like results parenting. Like that was a real result thing. You know what I mean? Like all the work and time that me and my wife put in to sit down and do homework with him and help him study and teaching him how to study and all that.
And he did well despite all of that, huh?
Yes. But I mean, I really felt the payoff it was so good, like, oh,
Insane.
thank God, like, we're seeing results. But very proud of him. It's
Yeah,
really
he's a smart
awesome.
kid. I know he struggles with ADHD,
Yeah.
and it's night and day. Like when he's medicated versus not medicated is night and day.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
pretty profound. I mean, it's something like, I think 1 in 15 kids have one form or another
Yeah.
of ADHD.
15% or something.
It's a significant part of the population, and any parent that has a kid with ADHD, like we all know.
Well, it's a bell curve, right?
Yeah.
It's your executive function, your frontal lobe executive function, which is your ability to maintain focus and to alter your attention and to inhibit your behavior, right? The inhibition is where you get the hyperactivity part, and the inattention is like the ability to focus.
Yep.
And we call it executive function for a reason, because it's basically the ultimate thing in guiding your decision making and your behavior, etc. And like pretty much most human traits, if you map them out, in a population, you're going to get something resembling a bell curve, right? For many features. And ADHD is basically just the low end of the bell curve. That's it.
Yeah.
It's not really. I mean, some people do have pathological states, but if you take the healthy population of people who don't have a disease, it really is a bell curve, and it really is ADHD. And that's where, like, how many kids have it depends entirely on where you draw the line.
Yep.
If you do 2 standard deviations, by definition, it's 5%, right? That's just the way it works out. But or I think it would be 2.5 at the low end, it'd be 2.5 at either end. If you do 1 standard deviation, it'd be a lot more. So and the thing is, we notice it a lot more because of school. It's because, like, all right, sit there and pay attention for 3 hours. If they weren't in that setting, it would be a lot easier to adapt to the world. You know what I mean? But
yep.
School is basically like made to filter, to filter out the kids with ADHD. And I get so frustrated. I mean, there's been, I don't know. I don't know why I haven't heard as much about it recently. I don't know if it's getting more accepted or what the reason is, but especially, 10, 20 years ago, so many people, like, there was this just standard narrative of, like, ADHD is a fake diagnosis, or it's really just an excuse for bad parenting, which is so frustrating. Or one thing I heard, like, multiple people, like, literally almost say the same thing. Like, isn't medication just putting a Band-Aid on it?
Wow.
Which is a terrible metaphor. It's like, well, first of all, what have you got against Band-Aids?
Mm-hmm.
I understand how people use that metaphor, but in a medical context, you're basically saying, oh, so you should let somebody bleed? You should, in other words, don't treat the symptoms, only treat core causes, right? It's like, well, that's terrible medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Treating symptoms is essential. And what if, I don't know, we don't know how to cure the thing, right? Yeah. Because it's like a brain development problem. So I'm sorry, you have the cure for ADHD? Tell us, guru, what this cure is that nobody knows about. Of course, either they're just repeating, regurgitating, what they're hearing, or they do believe in some magical treatment or something. Oh, you're going to treat it, you're going to cure it with this supplement or some shit. It's like, no, this is the way their brain works. That's it. This is their brain developed this way. There is no cure.
In a practical setting,
or
like
only symptomatic treatments. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, Stephen. Look, again, like you've said this many times. If anything worked, doctors would use it.
Yeah, right. If it actually worked.
But
unless they're hiding the cure.
It was
here's the other thing. They say, all right, well, you could treat it with, like, cognitive behavioral therapy, whatever. It's like, yeah, that's true. That's also symptomatic.
Yeah.
Right. That's the thing, is that's not changing the brain either. It's just a different way of treating. It's also considered symptomatic treatment. And of course you should do both, right? We never, no one's saying not to do the cognitive part of it.
Like, you are in a constant state of training kids with ADHD
Yeah.
in a way that parents that don't have kids with ADHD, you have no idea. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. It's like living in a tsunami. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Well, I mean,
every
and I-
day with every interaction.
Yeah.
It bleeds into everything. And the thing is, when it was very hard for my wife and I to make our mind up to give our kids medicine, right?
Yeah.
But did a ton of research, of course, talked to you about it, Steve, and we came to the conclusion after discussing it with the pediatrician, like we should try it. It doesn't do permanent. It's not a drug that you become addicted to.
Right.
It can't damage you, but it was still very hard. We give Dylan the medication, and his grades, when he went from a D to getting 100% on every test that he took.
He was getting like 110.
Yeah, he was doing better. Like, he would be getting extra credit, because I guess when you're at that age, like, they give you extra credit if you do better, if you show stuff.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like, Dylan was learning about solutions and mixtures. Like, what's the difference
Yeah.
between a solution and a mixture, right? So I'm doing a deep dive with him. I'm going into it, and they did an experiment in the class with salt.
Yeah.
So, and I actually did a little reading, and I found out something I didn't know that happens with salt. When you make salt water is a sodium, because there is a legitimate chemical reaction that happens when you put salt in water. The sodium and the chloride separate from each other.
Yeah.
And they're suspended in the water as separate things. And I didn't know that happened. So I tell him that, right? And we're discussing it. Well, he remembered it and put it on his test. And his teacher was like, you like couldn't believe that he knew what was going on molecularly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it really wasn't a big deal. It didn't take much explaining to him. And I didn't even think he was going to put it on his answer on the test. But because he did that, they gave him an extra 10 points, which put him over 100. You know what I mean? So, like, it's just with him living with a dad who's interested in science and skepticism that, he's getting like a lot of cool details that I happen to personally be interested in.
Yeah, I know it's anecdotal, but like Dylan is the poster child for this whole topic, because he's a very curious, very smart kid. Again, growing up in a very nurturing household with people who love science and critical thinking and everything, and yet he was struggling at school because of his brain. And I spent enough time with this kid, and I told Jay this, many times. Like, you could tell he's neurologically incapable of controlling his behavior. Like, he just, part of it was like, when he was younger, it's like, this is partly age, and it's hard, like, until he gets to around 7, it's hard to know how much of it is just developmental versus, that he's at the low end of the curve and he's got ADHD.
Yeah.
And obviously, the older he got, it basically wasn't getting better. It's like, this is ADHD. This is not just him being 4,
Yeah.
But you could tell, like, he's struggling, and his brain is incapable of doing like what you were telling him to do. Like, you would tell him, don't do that. He would do it. He just couldn't.
Yeah, he can't without the executive function. And then when you see him medicated and you talk to him,
it's a totally different person.
And you realize, like, this is him with executive function. But the school grades thing is like the 99%er. Like, that was like the oh my god moment, right?
That's objective.
And the other thing, though, which I find to be makes me very, very happy that he's medicated, is while he's medicated, he is training his brain to have certain behaviors.
Yeah.
Which will bleed into do bleed into all of his behaviors.
Yeah. It's like if your anxiety is so bad, like, you can't do cognitive behavioral therapy. You need the medication in order to be able to engage with the cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Like, you were trying to discipline him, but you can't discipline somebody who has no executive function. He needs to to be able to pay attention and process what you're doing in order for the discipline to then to take effect, and to also internalize it, which is the ultimate goal, right? Of raising, civilizing them, as Perry always used to say.
Yeah.
Is they have to internalize it to some degree, you know. But one time you said to me, Jay, something that Dylan said, which stuck with me too, which was amazing. He feels the difference.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And right, I can't maybe remember specifically what he said, but he said something like, "Yeah, when I'm not on medication, it's like his brain's on fire. Like his brain is just like he cannot control it. And then when he's on the medication, he feels like he's in control.
Yep.
Like he palpably can tell the difference.
Yeah, he's got. I mean, unfortunately for him, he's got pretty strong case of it.
Yeah.
But look, when he's not medicated, this is a funny part of this. Like, I can get more intimacy out of him when he's not medicated.
Yeah.
He's very intimate at night when the drugs have worn off and I'm putting him to bed, and he's more talkative and he wants to talk to me about like guy stuff, like he wants to be alone with me and wants to bust out. I have science books in there and we're always talking about. So he always wants to talk. He always wants me to call you guys at like 9 o'clock at night.
You can.
Yeah.
Up to 10 o'clock, you can call me.
Yeah.
If he has a science question.
Call him, man.
So both of my kids are acutely aware that Uncle Steve is a brain doctor.
Yeah.
And they tell people in school about it, which I think is really funny. But anyway, yeah. So as a parent, like I see these two sides to him, and I love both of them. I love him in any version of him that he is. I adore my children.
Of course.
But it has unbelievably helped. When you have a teacher who spends more time with your kid than you do, when you have a teacher tell you a profound change has taken place, you know what I mean? The teacher can like give you tangibly say, he can sit still, he can focus, his grades are outstanding, his retention is amazing. Like these things weren't in play before he was on medication. That's another one. Like, yeah, like everybody that's around him sees like a profound change. So I don't know if you're in my position, if you have a kid with ADHD or you think he might or she might have ADHD, get the diagnosis with your doctor and really think about it, because I do think in most cases it's definitely worth putting the child on the medication.
Yeah, I mean, definitely if they get a formal diagnosis and it's recommended, don't not do it because of some ideological anti-medication bias.
Yeah.
Right. That's the thing that frustrates me.
Fuck
it's like,
that.
yeah, it's people who don't do it because they have this metaphors like, oh, it's just putting a Band-Aid on it, or you shouldn't medicate kids. Like the idea of medicating kids just in and of itself is inherently bad. It's like none of that matters. That's all bullshit.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
The only thing that matters is the risk versus benefit of this specific intervention in your specific child. That's the only thing that matters. And and this is the thing that the medical profession, that professionals spend years researching, talking about, debating, thinking about in a far more nuanced way than any non-professional does.
Exactly.
That's just the bottom line.
Yeah.
I know it sounds elitist because it fucking is. Who cares? That's the way it is, right? It's like you're gonna like trade stocks when all you know about stock trading is what you saw on TV. Is that what you're gonna do? Do you think that somebody who's been spending 20 years trading stocks knows more about it than you do? They actually is probably not a good example because they don't get much better outcomes. But you know what I'm saying? Like this is why you need to talk to professionals, whether it's a financial advisor or whatever, because there's always so many layers of depth below what you can possibly imagine if you are not an expert, if you don't have a lot of experience with it.
Yeah.
So
and look, but I as somebody who very recently had a bad doctor give me bad advice and it had a profound effect on me. Of course, there are doctors out there who are not as good as a different doctor, right? You have to be a consumer with your healthcare.
Yeah, I'm talking about the consensus of expert opinion, not one person.
Right,
one
exactly.
person is never an authority figure. It's always.
I think it's important to say though, in this case, like you any doctor that you or your children are seeing, you should vet the shit out of them online and do everything that you can to get in front of the best doctors.
And if it doesn't sound right, get a second opinion.
Yeah.
Second opinions are good.
Yep.
So I tell any patient who comes to me and they saw a surgeon and they want to operate on their back and they want to, should I get a second opinion? I'm like, absolutely. You always get two. Before you let somebody cut into you, definitely get two opinions.
And someone said, and plumbing, and I completely agree. Yeah,
Yeah, even for stuff like that, totally. If someone says, "Yeah, that's going to cost $5,000 to fix your car," get a second opinion.
Mhm.
That one person could be trying to rip you off, or they could be incompetent. You never know.
always. I never. Oh my God! Like for this conference,
I was just gonna say,
right, Ian?
what
Like
about
talk
staging?
about price comparison and nitpicking pricing and everything down to the nub. Everybody that Ian and I have interacted with must absolutely hate me because I don't. Oh my God. It's and it look. There are a lot of companies out there, especially today, that are actively trying to rip you off, that are trying to get as much money out of you as they possibly can. You know, we have to be really smart as consumers, and really, it's one of those things. Like because of the economy and the global economy and everything that's going on, I feel like it's worse now than it ever was. So,
Oh, speaking of global economy, thank you, Alex, for the super chat. 50 Ron. I think that's a Romanian. Is it a Romanian?
what did he do?
It sent a super sticker, which is it says it pair character bowing down saying thank you. So it's like a visual thing that they can see on YouTube, but not on ours.
Oh,
But,
great. Well,
but
thanks.
thank you, Alex.
Yeah,
Man.
cool. I want to see it. We're
I
gonna see
know.
this.
You gotta open up YouTube chat.
Oh, it's YouTube.
50
Okay.
Ron Weasleys. That's right. That's what it is.
So speaking of Ron Weasley, I was on the treadmill and I started watching the first Harry Potter movie again.
Whoa.
And I was interested enough because I hadn't seen it in quite a while. I was like, I want to learn a little bit more about the making of the movie because I always find that to be very interesting. And I found out a few interesting things that I think you guys will like. One is that these kids were very, very young when they were filming this movie, so they were completely untrained. Like basically just blank. They had no training. They didn't know anything. And the director, there was 50, 100, 200 kids on the set at any given time. You know what I mean? With all these different scenes that they were doing. You can have like the three primary kids that are the stars of the movie in the foreground, but in the background, you've got a whole room full of kids.
Yeah.
And the director had to expertly manage these children and finding out about how he did it and how difficult it was for him to manage it. But he did do it, and he did figure out like really good ways of making things work. But a couple of things I found out. One was they very quickly realized that they would never finish the production in time if they only were shooting with one camera. They decided that whenever they're shooting, the kids interacting with each other, that they would have a camera on each of them at all times, because they needed to get all that extra footage and use it and very expertly stitch it together. And he said, the director said, if you watch the movie again and pay attention, you'll notice that there's a lot of quick cuts, because if one little thing worked with one of the actors, they'd use it, and they had to keep cutting because they never, not once in the first movie, did they ever get through any scene, from beginning to end.
Yeah.
They
What?
flubbed every single thing that they ever said and ever did. They flubbed it.
Wow.
So he had to get them like getting the first sentence of what they have to say correct. And then they cut to somebody else, and then, show a reaction shot. And then, there was a lot of that going on. So the DP, the director of photography, told the director, we got to get 3 cameras going at all times, or else this is not going to work. Yep. Yeah. Which is, I think it's just a cool thing to know. And the kids,
Michael Gambon, the guy who played Dumbledore, not in the first movie, but in every movie after that.
Well, it was, he came in on movie 3.
3? I thought it was 2.
No, the original
actor. 3? Okay,
yeah.
Yeah, from movie 3 on. Yeah, he died this week.
Oh, he did? He died too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the actor died this week.
Oh, that's a bummer. They both did a great job. They had 2 different interpretations of the character, and I thought they both did a good job. What was the first actor
again? I mean, he was more famous initially.
I forgot his name, but he was the godfather of the director. So the director,
Richard Harris.
Yeah.
Richard Harris. Yeah, I mean, he was freaking Richard Harris. Yeah, I mean,
the director's parents were best friends with Richard Harris, right?
Yeah.
So he called up Richard Harris and said, I'd like you to play Dumbledore in the movie, and he's like, no, I don't want to do that. He was like, didn't want to have anything to do with it. Then his granddaughter called him up and said, Grandpa, you have to do it. If you don't do it, I'll never forgive you. So he calls up, and keeping in mind, he's the godfather of the director.
Yeah.
They know each other. You know what I mean? So he finally calls him up and says, all right, I'll do it. So he does it. And it was really cool, like seeing him do his costume test and all that stuff. Another cool thing I found out was, what's his face that played Snape? Pepe. What's his name? The actor that played Snape.
Snape guy.
Oh God, I love him too.
Alan Rickman.
Alan Rickman deliberately didn't get to know the kids in the first movie and didn't have
and he didn't want them to be familiar with me. He wanted to be intimidating.
Exactly. And he did, and he was intimidating to them. So he was always in character with them and was kind of like standoffish with them so they would have a natural reaction.
I understand that.
But so a lot of the actors were doing things to help the kids get a more natural reaction. Like they were all kind of like helping coach the kids, which I think is really cool. Because it took everybody to do it. It was a very complicated thing to shoot a freaking movie. And think about like the quality of the movie they got out of those kids. I mean, it was a really good movie.
It really
was good. It was good.
I haven't seen it in years, the first one, but I think they did a pretty amazing job.
It's funny.
Those amateurs.
You watch older movies, like basically any movie made before the 70s, and the way children were directed was horrible.
It was horrible, yeah.
Every child was insipid and fake and just terrible.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an exception somewhere. I don't know. I can't think of one, but
Shirley Temple.
What's that? Shirley Temple?
Shirley Temple.
Yeah, you're right. You might be right.
But even she came off like so.
But even she was still
fake.
a little sing-songy, like whatever,
Yeah, a little sing-song.
You know what I mean? She was hamming it up. She was hamming it up. But no one directed kids to be like good actors, like to be natural.
Yeah, totally.
Natural.
That was a change in the industry. Like I don't know if they just said they. I don't know that I've ever read or heard anyone describe like exactly what the nature of that transition was. Did they just get better at directing kids, or was it a philosophical change?
Well,
the mines closed down, so all the children were out of the mines.
First of all, I can't speak from an expert position on this, but I will tell you what I do know. There was a big change in. So what was that movie? Oh God, I'm totally blanking out now. But who played? Oh God,
Who Framed Roger Rabbit? No.
Okay. Who played the Godfather? Who played the Godfather in The Godfather? What actor is that?
What's his name?
Good. I'm glad
Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando.
So Marlon Brando, when Marlon Brando came on the scene, he was a part of a group of actors who were acting in a new way, which was basically acting like it was more real. So they were bringing like method acting and realism in a way that didn't really exist before they started doing it. And he was like considered to be like one of the people who really was pioneering this. And if you watch his early movies, like they're really serious and very dramatic, and that change, Steve, is when acting had a huge shift, and I'm sure that children actors had a huge shift during that time frame as well.
Maybe.
I would just think that directors in general, in that crop of directors, like that, everything that happened on screen had to have more legitimacy at that time. It's a really cool thing to read about. I did read about it in detail, and I forgot because it was a long time ago. But it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, somebody pointed out that Danny in The Shining was did a great job of acting.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that was Stanley Kubrick. That was 1980, so that was at the beginning of the period where I think that kids were starting to be better directed. And I think someone else pointed out, which I agree with, that Steven Spielberg was good directing kids.
Yeah.
But again, we're talking about the 80s there,
What about
late 70s?
Somebody pointed out, I think it was Jim, pointed out Little Rascals.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was thinking, but that was comedic. And have you watched an episode recently?
No.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that they were good actors.
They weren't good
in
actors.
a modern sense. It worked because they were hammy comedic actors to begin with.
They're
Yeah,
very
that was fun.
kids in that time. It was very
medicated.
sing-songy. They would have a melody to the way that they say their lines,
Yeah,
which it permeates like any movie that you see with kids. Like they didn't talk.
it's so annoying.
Yeah, it is annoying. It's like every time a bell rings, an angel gets their wings. It's like, yeah, kids don't talk like that.
That's a perfect example of how I hate the way they
Totally.
Right.
Well, guys, it's almost 6 o'clock. My food is going to be delivered very quickly. My kids I hear them running around the house screaming right now.
Okay.
And I am home alone.
Oh,
My wife is flying back tonight. Yes, exactly. It's tough, man.
name
The
that actor.
ADHD medication has worn off, and I gotta dive into that. Oh my
Gosh.
God. So anyway, have a good weekend.
All right.
I appreciate the time to chat with you guys, and I'll see you. Hopefully, we'll be here
See
next
everybody. I guess we should be good for next week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll do the questions next week. I know there are some heavy ones. Apparently, they wanted us to
All right. Keep
discuss
track of
free
them,
will.
Ian. We'll
I
answer
was
them next
like,
week.
Okay.
All right.
night, guys.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.
How do I hit the end button? Where's the end button? I don't even know.
Click it.
I'm
click
clicking it. Here it goes.
Skeptic's Guide to the Universe is produced by SGU Productions, dedicated to promoting science and critical thinking. For more information, visit us at theskepticsguide.org. Send your questions to info@theskepticsguide.org. And if you would like to support the show and all the work that we do, go to patreon.com/skepticsguide and consider becoming a patron and becoming part of the SGU community. Our listeners and supporters are what make SGU possible.
So they all left. So we'll see. I guess we'll see you next week. To answer one question, are they playing Baldur's Gate 3? I don't know. I mean, they like D&D, so maybe they would. I mean, it is mostly a game just to have sex with squid monsters, right? I mean, not. I'm not cutting this out. Okay. See you next week, and come to Noticon and then other stuff. No, it's not the Ian show. Goodbye. I'm leaving. I got food. But they all. I thought Bob was gonna stay on for a second. He was there for a second, and then he clicked off. So, what are you gonna do? See you next Friday. Kunf. Okay. Yep. And Cyberpunk too. I know. Cyberpunk. You think they would play Cyberpunk? I don't know if they would play Cyberpunk. Maybe. All right. Later.